Anomalous trauma researcher Eve Lorgen reveals experiences and signs of alien lovebites, energy vampires, and narcissistic abuse. This is Live the Impossible Show, here to rock your world with quantum leaps on how to change reality, lead with passion, and co-create your dream. Tora, Pam, and Oliver dive deep with legendary conscious and world-changing leaders. Dare to be different and unleash your genius at our Holy Land membership site, wholYland.me. Eve Lorgen, author, hypnotherapist, and anomalous trauma researcher, reveals experiences and signs of alien lovebites, energy vampires, and narcissistic abuse. We chat about abductions, implants, alien technology, dream spells, twin flames, love obsessions, and entanglements from other dimensions. What are the signs of being bitten, used, or harvested? What can you do about it? How do we reclaim our power and go from victim to be unfuckwittable? Welcome, Eve Lorgen, to Live the Impossible Show, and it's wonderful to have you with us today for a good chat around history and perspectives around the scene from the female.
Yeah, warm welcome, Eve.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
So let's dive in, because it's like we have this new theme around history, and it's quite interesting that this is what we kick off this theme to have you on the show, because you are into so much more than, the male and the female. You are into relationships a lot, but there's also this more multidimensional reality to it. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background, or your story, and how you ended up here in 2021.
I'm still here. Oh my goodness.
Yes. That's a quite an achievement.
A big thing. Well, it's a long story. I don't want to make it too long, but what I actually am going to speak about has to do with a phenomenon that was actually related to one of the areas of my research as well as personal experience. And it has to do with what we knew, let's say, in the 90s and as alien abduction. Although now they may call it ET contact, ET visitation, otherworldly experiences with other beings, and sometimes it has a more of a physical component. So I actually started studying this. Actually, I was a biochemist first, right? And I worked in the biochem field for 7 years, but I got poisoned on a job, and I decided to change my career to counseling psychology after studying Oriental medicine. So I've studied a lot of different fields and come to have a kind of holistic view of how things work together, from scientific, from psychological, from spiritual, from all different levels of being able to understand reality. So part of my personal experience was having had unusual experiences that now I call anomalous trauma, as a kind of a wider spectrum way of describing unusual experiences that lie beyond the normal, but may be considered quite traumatic and unusual, and sometimes officially denied, which would fall into a lot of the kinds of experiences some people have with UFO contacts, missing time, abductions, or even MK Ultra related experiences where you're taken by some kind of alphabet soup agency or used as an operative, and then how that actually merges with some kind of extraterrestrial presence in this reality, on Earth, off Earth, and then how that might merge in secret black op projects like the secret space program. Although I didn't really become as aware of that in my early years of research when I wrote my first book. So really, I will just start off on the topic of my first book, which is called The Lovebite, in alien interference in human love relationships. So basically, it was something I discovered actually haphazardly. I didn't intend on writing this book. I didn't intend on even talking about it, because it sounds absolutely crazy. But I learned through people who have had repeated alien encounters or visitations that took on more of the abduction scenario. And so that would involve multiple UFO encounters, or sometimes they wouldn't even involve UFOs, but they might involve a being that has the appearance of an alien or an extraterrestrial that will visit at a particular time or place in that person's reality. It may include missing time, some kind of medical evaluation or weird thing, or even astral out of the body abductions, all kinds of unusual things. So anyway, I started a support group in San Diego County in California with many people who are having repeated types of experiences. So they weren't like one-time experiences of a sighting. There were people like, okay, we've had these experiences. They've been going on all my life, and they happen in my family line, or at least some family members, which suggests a genetic type of study or something that's much more involved than just some kind of medical evaluation study by some ET presence. So lo and behold, I think it's much more than just some kind of scientific study of medical or psychological or even spiritual, but it involves something that would be a harvesting kind of operation. So in my research, I wanted to know what they were doing, and because they were doing many more things that seemed to involve a manipulation and interference on a more subtle level. For example, in the relationships, or they would be dream hacking or communicating in such a way that it would influence someone's thought patterns, their beliefs, their feelings, and even their physical attraction to someone else. In other words, it would set people up in these love obsessions, like really phenomenal love obsessions, where it was beyond the norm, really. It was something that some people thought, oh, I met my twin flame, or I met my soulmate, and all these really unusual things happened on a paranormal level sometimes, supernatural synchronicities. And so it was beyond the norm. It wasn't just, meeting your soulmate. It was something that was much more beyond chance. So I defined that in my book called The Lovebite. I'll just go ahead and show you what that book looks like, and hopefully you can see it. This was the first book in 2000, and there's many case histories of the original cases that I work with, including people in my support group. So what had happened, I was doing a support group with my colleague, James Bartley, who is actually now in Australia. But we did a lot of research with not only the alien abductions, but what we call the military abduction component, or MILABs, and also some of the whole reptilian thing that was starting to come out in Dr. Carla Turner's work, which was poo-pooed in the contemporary UFO truth seeker alien kind of contact movement and belief systems. It was more of a, it was too negative, for example. It was not along with the positive space brother, ET, here to save you, be spiritually ascending, whatever, right? I mean, we hear a lot of these different narratives and like, oh, they're good, they're bad, or and they don't know what they are. And so we just have to take what is the experience that people are having over time in their personal relationships and in their life, and how can we assess what's really happening. So this is what I did in my book, and I really wanted to focus on, well, these are taboo elements that they don't want to talk about, and they want to sweep this under the rug. In fact, one of the funny things that I wanted to share, which was kind of like when we talk about things that women tend to want to talk about more or focus on, even within the UFO research community or alien abduction community, we tend to be interested in, hypnotherapy, relationships, interpersonal communications, and spiritual issues. Whereas, let's say the ufologist, the classic ufologist, would be like the physicist, and let's keep it scientific, nuts and bolts, and oh, well, that's not relevant, that's not scientific, da da da. And so they would like basically take out relevant aspects of the entire experience and the entire phenomena, which Jacques Vallée was actually a really good researcher way back in his time to basically put the whole ball of wax out, to say we need to look at the whole thing. We can't just say, let's look at only the nuts and bolts that are relevant to make it look scientific, but we need to look at the whole thing. So this is what I did, and worked with Barbara Bartholic as my mentor. And she actually had the insight and the awareness to help me in my personal life when I was going through the Lovebite myself. And I didn't even know what it was until we had many conversations and communications over the years to understand what was happening.
I think that's quite often the case, isn't it? You just, because nobody talks about it.
No.
You just think you're going crazy, or it's just me, or isn't everybody else like this, or whatever that comes up with the thing. And I totally agree with you on the research basis. I've done psychology and medicine and stuff myself, and it's just, it's very difficult to get that whole picture. You either have to do quantitative or you do qualitative. You can't bring the two together.
Yeah.
And with psychology, it makes it difficult to get, let's say, like even in the patriarchal world, and I'm going to spin off that because this is, I don't mean to make it a negative thing, but what happens, because I was a scientist, right? So I know the scientific thinking. My dad was an engineer, aerospace engineer. I know what it's like. Okay, let's keep it within the scientific framework of understanding how to have a logical deductive reasoning so we could, know what the facts are versus anecdotal evidence, da 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 da. But what happens is that we tend to miss the holistic picture of being able to make the appropriate connections to wholly understand something so as to have a better solution if there is a problem. And so this is where sometimes the segmented and compartmentalized, left brain scientific thinker will miss things and actually lose what I call not only the spiritual discernment, but the emotional intelligence to perceive something that is important. And so if I can just shift, the funny thing that had happened, I was at a conference in 1999 in Washington, D.C., and it was one of these MUFON conferences that I was invited to as a speaker. And, I was kind of like out there, considered on the fringe with the UFO abduction research because of like the Lovebite. Are you kidding me? It was like totally nuts, right? So I remember that there was a number of people on the panel of speakers that we would, at the end of the conference, we would all be a panel speaker in front of the audience, and then people would ask questions to each of the presenters. And so there were several people who had personal abductions who were there, and several scientists and researchers, and one of them was Stanton Friedman. He has passed away now. He's a high-level physicist who has done UFO research for many years. The nuts and bolts classic ufologist from like the 90s and 2000s, but he helped ufology significantly. But I remember I happened to be sitting next to him, and that I had a binder at that time that had the picture of my book on the seat. What do you call it? The seat on the table. And then he looked at it, and like, of course, it's this picture, right, with the alien, and like, it's like phallic. Let's face it, right? And I, on purpose, somebody designed it that way. So he saw my binder and said, like, what the fuck? Well, that's not scientific. And he just kind of he scoffed at me like, what's this person sitting next to me, like, a bad reputation for ufology or something, that I'm presenting something so unscientific. And I was like, oh, but it's true. That was kind of funny, but it actually represents things that we need to put out in the open in order to assess. Let's look at the full ball of wax here of what's happening, and not just try to cherry pick the data like some people who do in censored journalism, right? And look at, well, this is what's happening. And I've experienced this in my group with several people who had dramatic love obsessions, even though they might be married to somebody else, by the way. And they might have an obsession with somebody who was what I call the targeted partner of an alien manipulated or set up relationship by a particular type of alien, ET, or what I call, it could be an interdimensional handler, and it could take different forms based on how we now understand the phenomena. But in the beginning, this was known through the window of the alien abduction phenomena, and a unique thing that happened within that subpopulation with what the aliens are doing to their chosen ones and how they're experimenting on them. And it's much more than just sticking in implants or doing the hybrid breeding program. And so this is something Barbara Bartholick found over and over again. Like, why would this person who's having all these experiences, and they might be given prophetic events of the future and how these ships will come for rescuing people in the ascension or whatever. We get all these stories, but then within all that, and they put them in like one of these classic alien Lovebite scenarios that don't seem to make sense, because one would think if this is a hybrid breeding program of genetic combinations of different alien and human species, that they would put people together so they have a genetic downline. Let's say somebody is pregnant and they have the child, and that person is in a study, or they take a lot of times they take the pregnancy and then they grow them up on the ship, or they use them, whatever. And that would be like a hybrid study of why they took you, or why they maybe put you together with someone. So basically, one of the things that happened more often than not was like, wait a minute, many of these people who are having this Lovebite situation of being set up or having a love obsession with somebody else wasn't because they got pregnant or had children with them. So why are the aliens doing this? Or why are the MyLab handlers in these military and alien kind of quasi alphabet soup deep projects. Why are they doing this? And so I discovered 4 main reasons why they're doing this. And this was some of the questions that I answered in the first book. Like, why are they doing this? This sounds nuts, right? Oh, well, they want to make hybrids, right? That's one, which is probable if the person has children, and then they have children who are abducted, and they're obviously like a little bit of a hybrid. And that does happen, by the way. Another reason was what Barbara Bartholomew thought. Most of it was a kind of emotional harvesting or energy loosh operation. I don't know if you heard the term loosh, but it's more, I think Robert Monroe used this term years ago, where certain vampiric entities had a propensity towards using emotional energy and sexual energy and life force energy, prana, to feed off of, because they're vampiric in nature. And certain sorcerers actually do this too in certain magical operations in black magic. So I learned, wait a minute, some of the reasons for this is that they're harvesting emotional and sexual energies for some purpose. Okay.
Yeah, we've actually been talking about that a little bit during the year of 2020 here, that maybe there is actually what was an opportunity. So I totally get where you're coming from.
I believe that's true, actually. And this is something that Barbara Bartholomew felt happened on a mass scale as well. I mean, there's individual cases, but she said there was also the phenomena, which I'm coming across quite a bit, even after my first book was written, which she would say that they're creating, let's say love obsessions in the general populations by, let's say, using a superstar or celebrity figure, and then using that figure within certain, I don't know what to call it. I mean, it's more than mind control, because it's a type of interdimensional interference that is linking in people with, let's say, celebrity figures, and then creating mass love obsessions with some figure that they may utilize, even maybe in a mass ritual way, for all we know, that is actually taking energy from the mass population for another purpose. So
is that what you see, what's going on in Hollywood, like
yes.
when you have seen,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's more than that. I mean, they do the rituals, right, and the music, and they can do a loose feeding operation with the main celebrity. But what's going on is that people are having like strong psychic connections with a particular celebrity figure. And it may not be like a musician or an actor, but it could be someone famous, even in the same field that they're in. But it's a significant connection that is beyond chance, that they think it's like their twin flame or astral twin flame thing. And it's more than just, let's say, an obsession because you like that rock star or something. There actually is something behind it. But that seemed to happen a lot. Like, wow, why is that? And I think, it's getting off base, but many in the entertainment industry, as a subset of the population in what we'd call the Illuminati controlled populations, where there's certain family bloodlines that may be utilized for the agenda of the Luciferian hierarchy. And so they may utilize certain people in those bloodlines. Let's say they're in an entertainment industry, or they're in politics, or they're in religion, or whatever, and they may utilize these people and then utilize them to connect them with others for the loose feeding. So it's like they're used that way, but they may not even know it. So it's kind of a weird thing.
I mean, that's coming out a bit more, hasn't it? I mean, the last year or so, I mean, I hadn't really heard of it at all. And I've started, maybe it's just that I'm aware of it now. I'm not sure which way around it is. You never know with these things, do you? But there seems to be much more awareness of that.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have known that until, that was something actually Barbara Bartholomew had shared with me in many private conversations. And it was unfortunate that more of her work couldn't be made public, but she didn't have the ability or the way to be able to do that at the time. And then she died after an accident, which was believed to be a part of a, I call it targeting operation, more or less. And she had a lot of that because she worked with people and, got out like really hardcore information that they did not want out. So some of the reasonings for the Lovebite, which if I could continue with, let's say, the 4 main reasons why we thought that this was happening, why people were put together in love obsessions or some kind of manipulated relationship situation. If there was someone who was, let's say, a whistleblower, or they're getting too close to discovering the truth of their own experiences that defies the narrative they want you to believe. So, for example, even in my own life, like when I wanted to discover my own experiences related to alien abduction, as well as like the Lovebite, I was actually going to see and visit Barbara Bartholomew. I mean, I usually don't say this publicly, but this was years ago. and I was going to take a plane trip to see her, spend a weekend or whatever to do a whole bunch of hypnotic regressions to find out what was going on. And then before that happened, like 4 days before the trip, I had one of these astral dream abduction things that's like what we called in my lab stage managed dream, which is defined in the book, where you wake up in a dream, but it feels like more than a dream, and it's like a weird kind of abduction experience. And then you're confronted with, let's say, a military figure and maybe a reptilian, and then that figure, well, in my case, they basically threatened me to not to do the regressions, so not to travel. You don't want to know about it, just go along with it. And they were trying to like mind control me with imbued mind control suggestions to not do it and just go along with the whole thing. And I knew there was something shady about this, and I wanted to discover it, and then ended up like getting ill with like marks in my throat, like a severe sore throat, and I couldn't travel because I was too ill to travel.
Wow.
And even then it was like I couldn't seem to get past certain levels of interference to like not go there. And there was definite threats on a very real level that I was concerned about, that I thought, okay, I'm just not going to do it right now, but I am going to get to the root of this. And I did. So these things happen. So in a Lovebite situation, sometimes it's used to throw someone off track from their healing and recovery process, where they may discover more truths about themselves, let's say within a secret project or within an alien abduction situation or whatever. And that if the controllers and the handlers, whoever's handling them, including aliens or humans or family members could be, they may set you up in a Lovebite. So it's like a manipulated relationship or a setup, like a honeypot or a Romeo agent in the classical, war kind of terminology, but it's much more subtly done within the alien Lovebite way in which it happens. And you really have to read the book to get the full set of nuances that occur as part of, like, how do you know if this is happening to you? But I just wanted to give you some of the reasons behind it that we discovered later. So one of them would be like the neutralization tactic, and there's a reason to neutralize someone or to throw them off track from their destiny even, right? If they have a high vibe, and let's say from a high perspective spiritually or whatever, and let's say they might be in the future waking up millions of people or thousands of people in a positive way, then I think they have the technology, and I've learned this to be true later, like looking glass technology, time travel stuff, and some of these secret projects, that there are some handlers who would know, okay, this person might be a problem. We're gonna try to throw them off track several times throughout their lifetime so that they don't, get to what they're going to do. We don't want them to wake up all these people, so they'll just throw in all these Romeo agents or Lovebite setups or, targeted kinds of things, interference factors to throw that person off. So I think that actually happens. And so the whole neutralization thing was one of the reasons why some of the whistleblowers ended up having like one of these Lovebite setups, and they didn't know till later that it like just totally threw them off. They got sick, they got financially ruined, they went through a divorce, they lost their job, whatever. So, and that could happen from one bad relationship. So a setup. So a lot of times the person doesn't know. If, let's say, there's a targeted partner who's set up with you or whoever the person is, sometimes that targeted partner is not aware that they're being used as part of this whole thing. So they can't be blamed for it. Like they know that they're being used as a Romeo agent or something. Very often it's interdimensionally handled and manipulated because of both persons' unique characteristics, which we talked about in several panels over the years, like how we can get out of this kind of interference. And a lot of it has to do with our own unresolved traumatic issues, maybe belief systems we grew up with that make us have a propensity towards something that can be used against us as a weakness, So we discovered like all that as time went on, like why these things were happening. And then the last one that I wanted to mention, this one's kind of wild, but another reason why they tended to use people in a Lovebite setup, and this tended to happen with those who had more of the reptilian experiences, or they were in what I call a My Lab project, where it included aliens and humans working together with certain people who are used as operatives because of their superior abilities that are already groomed and trained in these secret projects. And so if they had an ability that could be amplified, let's say a psychic ability to remote view or to do something that requires a lot of I don't know, you can call it tantric sexual energy.
Mhm.
So they would match someone or two people who are in projects together, and they would know that they had a very good connection, and then they would basically amplify their sexual kind of kundalini energy. And then when they did that in the appropriate way, it basically amplified their psychic abilities and certain other abilities, so that when they went out on black operations in these secret projects, they were able to do this much more readily, because they were amplified through it's like a tantric magical process, actually. So they're doing this at high levels in these secret projects because they already know the secrets. So, for the regular person who has no idea, I mean, it's off the scale in terms of the current technologies and things that are being used in these secret projects. I would say, yeah, I mean, it was quite a discovery to find out, oh my God, this is what they're really doing. So we've talked about this like on other shows. Me and James Bartley in particular, and Lauda Leon and myself have talked about some of the deeper, unusual things that happen in the MyLabby element. And there's so many unusual things that happen. But I think the Lovebite is a primary thing that has happened to many who've had this kind of experience. And I just think it's a way to control and manipulate people if they have the ability to do so. But it's not necessarily all bad. So I would say that in my personal experience, that if you really want to be able to get through life successfully and not be like a whining victim and just be destroyed by some of this negativity and targeting that can happen, you have to really use all your efforts to have the best intention and really gear towards doing the best you can to make every problem a learning challenge, to be your best and do whatever you can that's in your highest and best good and others, so that we don't let this, destroy us or break us. Because I have met people who've gotten very jaded from having this kind of thing happen or being targeted. So I would say that, as long as you keep your sights and your spiritual integrity and your emotional integrity at a good high place, that you can benefit from this, so that it all turns out for the greater good. Mm-hmm. So when you are at that place, this can be maybe even perceived as a type of shamanic initiation, for lack of a better term, that it may be a difficult experience, but through the experience, you've like expanded your awareness and your power and your resilience and your understanding of the world, so that you could become a better person. So I always wanted to throw that out there, because I don't want to be, so negative that you think, oh, we have to be so afraid of all this. We don't need to be afraid. We just need to be aware and know how to,
Yeah, I totally agree, because also we have all these superpowers. There's a reason why we get targeted, because we have all this power, but the whole hijacking and the programming of keeping us in fear, and that we feel we need to protect ourselves all the time. But even like I've been quite affected by the radiation, 4G, 5G, all of that coming out, and been quite sick from it. Couldn't even go on the train or go to the mall because of the Wi-Fi and everything. And due to what I call it, like to be unfuckwithable. So it's like really I said, no, I'm not going to be victimized. And because I felt totally trapped, to then, do the inner work, clear out and step really into my power. And now I don't get the same effects and symptoms anymore, because, I rise above it, or, beyond it, or whatever you want to call it. And so I can also see that it's an opportunity to use these types of experiences to something that becomes much greater. And it's like it opens up a totally new reality, having these connections with other realms and dimensions. And so, but I'm also curious a little bit about more of like to hear maybe some of these stories, because I don't know, a lot of times I sense that it's a very masculine, these, especially like the reptilians, the Dracos, it's like, it feels very, very masculine. It feels like they don't actually get the power of, it's more that patriarchic, that part of the brain left is a lift? I always forget.
But I don't know the word.
Yeah, but the hemisphere of the brain, you know, like the logical, conductive, scientific, separated type of thinking. So it also feels like that's for me. And when I, in my encounters, a lot of these, I don't know what to call them, but a bit more negative or like manipulative aliens have a very masculine energy. What do you know about that?
It's interesting because in the experiences that I came to understand and be reported to me, especially through Barbara Bartholick, where she started becoming more aware of the reptilian figure in these experiences, where there may be many different types of, let's say, ETs that will show up within one person's experiences over several times, or within one major abduction where numerous different kinds of ETs would show up. But the reptilian ones tended to have the more of the masculine. It's almost like there was more male reptilians perceived, although I know I sense there were female ones too, but the reptilian ones were more of the sexual orientation. They were masters at sexual energy and, you know, I mean, astral rape, let's just put it bluntly, like, you know, raping and then manipulating sexual kundalini energy. And what was it? Something else. And they were warriors too, so they're very warrior-like. So there's more of the male energy within that particular type, although some beings might have a more appear as feminine. But in terms of, I don't know, yeah, well, like the AI, for example, in some of the reptilian grays are the ones that are very logical. They would be more, I guess, left brain dominant in terms of almost like an artificial intelligence way of computing thought processing. And so that is like limited and not holistic, whereas feminine would be maybe more holistic and right brain and integrative and nurturing. So, and maybe not as militant or military controlling, but I don't know if there's more males or females, but I know that certain angels will only appear as males, but they have a male and a female energy. They have an external male energy or figure, but they also have a female energy within them. And I've heard that from people who've had angelic interventions, including myself, which was really interesting. And that happened because of sometimes I have conversations with people where it's secret information. And then you're like, uh-oh, we were pinged and they're going to come after us. And then they'll come after you interdimensionally and try to attack you and abduct you. And we knew that was going to happen. So one night I prayed and prayed, you know, in the name of Jesus Christ to protect me and this other person. And then an angel came, like a real angel. And then what was interesting is when the angel came, it was more, I guess you would call it astral maybe, but when it came and entered the room, it was a very, very tall, thin male figure wearing like a white, I don't know, not a cloak, but a sleeveless kind of shirt thing. But it was like the arms are really long, but I knew it was male, but it had a female, male, comforting, loving presence. And that angel came and comforted and laid with me like the entire night, just as a comforter to protect me from what we knew was a threat. And so sometimes these things happen, you know, in the midst of all these weird things, like if you're having some of these malevolent attacks, then sometimes intervention beings will come to help of different. They look different. So I don't know why I just thought of that, but sometimes they are all males, sometimes they're male, female, and sometimes they may be female. But the reptilians tended to have more of a male thing.
That was coming up for me was the emotional energy, you know, because the emotional energy you typically think of as being more on the feminine side. And I personally always think of angels, for example, as being very emotional, loving, compassionate beings. And some of the more alien reptilian as being soulless is probably not quite the right word, but that emotional detachment or there's no obvious emotion.
Sometimes they're not actually. Sometimes reptilians are actually more passionate and fierce. Sometimes angry, sexual, but sometimes they're actually really good warriors and they're more passionate, whereas the grays and the insectoids might be a little more intellectual and cold and emotionally, I don't want to say emotionally absent, depending on how they interact. So, I mean, I just get the reports of people who've come to me more now as a result of they think they've got a Lovebite or a false astral twin flame thing. So those are the kind of reports I get now. I don't really study and work with people who are having the classic alien abduction where they just want to get a regression to find out what happened. Although I can still do that. It's just that in reality, the trauma is usually so great or in such a way that one has to work through a lot of other issues before you could actually be ready to uncover all that, because in reality there are mind control techniques being used and severe trauma, and sometimes we call entity attachments or even demonic forces that actually prevent the memory from surfacing. And some of that happens within the mind control areas of that, and it can get kind of complex, but it's not an easy black and white picture, really. No. There's so many things involved, but there definitely is a relationship manipulation aspect that can take a certain appearance that I describe in the book. And then lastly, there's some things that I discovered later through working with people, that there is a pattern and dynamic of, let's say, if you have a relationship that's being set up and the targeted partner happens to have a malevolent, negative, or hosted, what I call hosted, they could have a demonic attachment, they could be possessed, or they could have an alien attachment like a reptilian, for example. And then if they are hosted by one of these entities that are energy vampires, then it plays out in a certain way where the way of the relationship has a certain signature that may mimic a lot of the things that happen within a narcissistic abuse kind of situation. And so when we know how to deal with that, even on a regular psychological level, sometimes we're able to better to heal, deal with, and separate ourselves from those interference factors that are basically stealing our energy and trying to manipulate and control. So there's several things that happen, but it's definitely real, though. I would have to say it is real. And people don't really want to know about that.
Yeah, and I think that with the more you start to move in these other realms, where because also it's just like often you don't see them, and they don't walk around in 3D. It's more like the fourth, fifth dimensional realm, which also means that the more we move out into the other higher realms, they can't even touch us. It's like they can't get into our field, is my experience or sense. So I'm also curious about like the different implants. And it's like how do we, like just a few months ago, I woke up one morning and it's like or one night in the middle of the night, and I could feel that they put in like a couple of implants in my spine, my neck, and between my shoulders, and I could hardly breathe. So then we had a meeting in Holy Land where we actually, it's just like we just removed together in the collective field, and it was amazing. Also, because what happens was like what was the doubt and the challenges that arose with that experience. It's like I've had them before and removed before, but also it's just like it's almost like you can feel they implant this doubt, and the thought patterns become quite it's just like, who is this person? It's like from 1 minute to the next, you could feel that you start to have all these weird thoughts. It's like, I haven't thought of like this in 10 years, or,
that's not me. I don't normally say that. Where's that come from?
Yeah. Like technology can aid that. I call the artificial intelligence invasive sentient thought packets and programs can be transferred through certain technologies, as well as implants. I think implants are fourth dimensional as well, or astral, where like when we do hypnotic regressions or certain clearing exercises, do a scan, and sometimes they will appear a certain way, like visually, or they'll have a sound, or they'll have a feel to them, and then they may have information associated with how they got there. And it's always interesting how people describe these. I actually have an article that someone did some years ago. It was a man who had like a lot of the negative alien abductions from Greys, reptilians, some of the more negative races, and that they just chocked him full of implants and negative suicidal thoughts. And I mean, really dark stuff. And he did some healing with a local woman in Bosnia. I think it was in Bosnia or Croatia, Serbia. but he was able to do graphic design of all the implants that he saw clairvoyantly in his sessions over a period of time. And it was really amazing what he saw, and then like what the implants did and how they are like on a micro level and what they do, and the, the chakras that they link into, or the parts of the body. And so it is, I think that's a refined science somewhere, alien technology, that they can do this. And I think humans, sorcerers, and some humans also know how to do this if they know how to influence people that way. So.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, but maybe also too, that there are ways that we can, like, keep us out of that field where we get those attacks, but also to recognize the truth of this, and that this happens, and it can explain a lot, where I think that we are so programmed to believe that, oh, something wrong with me, and I thought I healed that, and then a lot of spiritual people, they start to bang their head in the wall. It's like, no, I'm so bad, and I'm not good enough, I haven't done it right, and now it becomes like this almost like prophecy around it. It's like you relive these traumas over and over, when it's actually something external.
Yeah, that does happen. I mean, that used to happen to one of the ladies in my book who I visited, who had a lot of the military and reptilian, but she also had alien grays and different kinds of aliens in her experiences. But one of the things, and I think it was, she kind of combined a lot of the military with the reptilians, because they were, in her situation, they were kind of working together, where it was as if the reptilians actually had the higher locus of control in terms of handling and hierarchy. But what they would do is, in order to get her back in control, like to be well handled, it was they would reactivate her traumas of sexual abuse and different things. So they would deliberately reactivate to get her all like dissociated and afraid, and basically throw her off from feeling confident and powerful, and to get you basically into fear. So sometimes these techniques are to throw us into fear or to reactivate traumas. And we don't need to do that when we're doing trauma resolution. Sometimes we need to remember what happened, but not to reactivate it as a way to re-traumatize. So you have to be really careful with some people, and, make sure. I just think getting the implants out and these spiritual attachments first, and then working on the programs and the trauma resolution can help alleviate a lot of that, so they don't come back. But a lot of it is like, sometimes it's people we're with, or a group we're with, that and basically acts as an infecting source. And I hate to sound bad about this, but I've learned this over the years, that like you could be fine for a while, and then all of a sudden you start having experiences again. Maybe you're living in an apartment building where the sorcerer lives upstairs, or some negative energy, or somebody that has like all the attachment, it just kind of spins in your field. Or sometimes it's too many negative shows you're watching on TV will actually enter into your reality and your dream life, dream hacking through what you're watching on TV and stuff. So sometimes you have to be really like a good Buddhist, where you don't attach or repel, like with grasping any particular belief or feeling, and you try to stay clear and hold your boundaries. But a lot of my work now is learning how to hold your boundaries and understand when you're having a boundary invasion on an energetic level, and learning how to manage that and to build your energy field so that you're no longer as vulnerable to some of these abusive and manipulative interference patterns. And so that takes a whole new learning, because it may be against what we've always been raised to think was right, or to do or not do.
Yeah, and I think that's becoming more and more vital for more and more people right now, isn't it? It is to really learn the boundaries. And I'm feeling there's more and more of this manipulation becoming mainstream, for want of the best of a word.
I mean, right now with the lockdown and the fear narratives, and then there's just so many competing narratives that are throwing people into a frenzy of confusion. And that tactic is actually a mind control tactic of cult abusers. And so when you can understand, for example, narcissistic abuse from cult abusers, or even like high level sorcerers or alien shit, right? Then you could see, okay, this is what they're doing, and this is how to avoid it. This is how to pull back, go gray rock. You've heard that term in narcissistic abuse. You go gray rock, you be invisible, you be boring to those like people in those groups so they don't pull you into their dramas, pull you into their chaos and their loose feeding operations, whatever it is. So it's good to know how it works so that we can learn how to navigate more without a lot of problems and with more sovereignty, ultimately.
Yeah. I also feel like the great tool for me personally is just like I've had a lot the last few months, those attacks where I feel like they try to get into my field and into my head, and and basically I tell them to fuck off, and it's just like, you are not welcome. You have not ask permission to go into my field, so you get the F out of here. And that energy is just like it just builds. It's almost like you can feel I can feel my kundalini when I really go into this authentic rage, but it's like that is pure. It's just like, who are you to get into my field without my permission? And this is like, if you don't have, anything good to provide that is for the highest good and come with love and compassion, you're not welcome, and get the F out. And that has saved me so many times. And it's almost like I don't get the attacks anymore in the same way. It's quite extraordinary, actually. But it takes to know the discernment, like when something enters your field. And I think that as a lot of empaths, we haven't been taught how to discern the emotional field and the energy field. So it's just like, I take on everybody else's emotions and thoughts and everything because I'm so open, and to really learn those boundaries, as you said, and learn that it's just like, no, that is your shit. You get out of my field.
Well, we've sort
like
of also
buffer.
been programmed for our whole life to not relate to what's inside of us and our own sovereign, autonomous beingness, but instead relate to calendars and clocks and have tos, and it's all artificial, the school system, the work system, the work hours, the work months, it's
science,
and the media coming in, telling us what's good, what's bad, what to think, what to strive for, what not to. All of that is one really, really big soup of trying to steer us away from the inner autonomies that or whatever it's called that we do have.
I agree. I think there's so much that wants to pull us away in an unnatural way, and it takes a lot of effort to go against the grain of the program, which I think the program is large scale mass. I don't know what. I think more people are waking up and who really prefer a more peaceful life in harmony with nature and harmony with your energy levels, and not be, basically a slave living in poverty, always afraid you're going to end up homeless the next week. Like, who wants to live like that, right? And people are being led to live in such a way that they're very afraid, and they feel like they don't have enough, or they won't have enough, and it's engineered for a loose feeding operation, control and manipulation. And it really goes back to, I know it sounds judgmental, but I think some basic biblical truths of, there's two basic forces that are in a war, meaning good and evil, or those that are against they could say God and the benevolent nature of a good God that is compassionate and giving and all the good things that you would think of. And then there's those that have turned away from that basic power and life force creator. And because they have broken away, they become vampires. Why? Because they're not connected to source. Duh. It's easy to figure out after a while when you observe Satanists, for example. And I know I'm going on a thing here, but I've noticed it, so that you get the energetic signature. Okay, this person's connected, this person's not. Maybe this person's just not healed, and if they healed and reconnected with their original essence, they wouldn't act in such a way. But basically, when you're talking about the real dark side, they are disconnected from almost like a benevolent creator source, so that they must pull from those who are organically connected to the real source. So that's why there's a problem. So those people tend to act like major narcissists, right? And so they're always controlling and manipulative, and then loose feeding operations. So that's like, okay, that's the signature. I got it. So when we could recognize the signature of what it is, we work in ways to protect our boundaries, and to work in ways so that they just can't hook in, and we keep building our field of resiliency and spiritual immune system. And eventually we're able to like blip off their channel. And the whole idea is really to blip off that channel so that no pingbacks come for them to re-enter into our reality. So that's part of what I do with clients, is learning how to build up our awareness and our strength so that this is no longer a problem for us, and we're able to basically live the way we want and have what we want in a kind and humble way in the real world with integrity, and then learn how to bypass some of this unnecessary suffering, so to speak. So,
but isn't it even, I said that a few times on our show, I think that I have this sense that a lot of these, elite, Illuminati, cabal, Satanists, like the darkest of the dark, they are more enslaved than we are, because it's like they need us to
yes,
fill up, whilst we are self-generating through our energetic life force. And so we don't, in that sense, I think that is also like for me a key to take the power back, instead of being victims to this elite who runs the show. That to say, well, actually, when we realize it, we run the show, we can run the show because we have the power. We don't need to feed something from them. We don't need them, but they need us.
yeah, that's true.
Pretty much agree with you on that.
Yeah, I know one of the things that has come across my desk, so to speak, was when people had one of these dark side of Cupid bad love bites, where the partner of the false twin flame or the twin flame or whatever was like a guru who was connected with high level beings, pretending to be a guru, a benevolent guru, but really behind that guru was a lot of vampiric entities masquerading as beings of light, in any number of traditions. Like I've seen it happen within a Christian tradition, or a Vedic Hindu kind of thing, or even Buddhist. And so I've seen several where it's the same signature that's playing out as, let's say, the false spiritual guru energy that's pretending to be good, but really behind the scenes it's a loose feeding, control and manipulation operation through a really good deception and activating bliss and certain synchronicities to try to cause someone to believe in what they're saying and be more easily manipulated into that cult kind of thing. But it usually involves like a linking in of the beings, even on a love bite kind of feel to it. So I would have to say that, over time, I've had to look at what is the energy signature of that which is true and benevolent and has this signature of the spirit of truth and goodness and love and compassion and wisdom and all those things, and that which does not have that frequency signature, and learn how to discern on that level. And then that helped me, instead of thinking, oh, this was right, this is wrong, and they're wrong, and blah, 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 it was like, because I've experienced both, where there was good and bad on either tradition, and then had to discern there's something more and something deeper on a more pure level that speaks truth. And so we always have to, if we can find that within us, within our purity of intention, then it's like we will recognize that.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, if I would just continue, like something is so connected in our heart of beingness based on the original essence of who we are. Those laws don't have to be what I call like an anal retentive law that someone has to like all these rules and regulations until you're like like an anal retentive person who can't think straight. It would be like the spirit of truth is written in your law, and it's an intuitive process of knowing like basic right and wrong and how to act and behave, more or less. So we shouldn't need like strict laws and regulations and and then pretty soon you feel like, oh my God, they're judging me all over the place and whatever, So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. So.
Yeah.
Go deep to our trauma resolution and our understanding ourselves and understanding others, what our triggers are, learning how to really appropriately emotionally be literate. We call it emotional literacy, is really the missing link of spiritual discernment. And and I wouldn't have known that unless I kind of went through it. So you could know the whole Bible and think you're spiritually astute, or any religion or any spiritual thing, but if you're not on the ball with your own emotional self-knowledge and trauma resolution and healing and integration and deep connection of fullness with the spirit of truth, you won't see it. You won't have the spirit of discernment. And that blew me away. I thought I had it. I'm like, well, I just got taken for another ride with another Lovebite or whatever. I'm like, okay, I got to do more trauma resolution, more emotional literacy, and have more understanding of subtleties of boundaries and energy. And so there's more to learn, I guess. We're never like,
but isn't that also
static.
part of the whole programming of not, like to not know who we are? Because it's just like, it comes back. If we don't know who we are, we won't be able to discern.
Absolutely.
So that, and you can see how we are, even I remember when we started to homeschool our kids, and the whole, the social aspect was something that a lot of people were so worried that, like, you can still, learn the facts, but the whole socialistic, so they learn to be with people and, how they go with the same age, blah, blah, blah. And I realizing that there was a guy who said, well, but isn't that just a way to program you and manipulate it you to be someone else you're not, to fit in? So from that moment, it was also like, it is, because we change ourselves to fit into the flock.
Yeah.
And instead of actually being who we are, and that is, so the whole, to be socialized into something is to get more and more out of sync with who you are. So it's a very like down to earth example in this. But,
well, it's interesting you brought that up, because one of the things that I'm actually learning with a colleague, that we're doing an online Zoom support group coming up actually at January 20th, but it's called the Energy Dynamic Model. And it has a somewhat of a Taoist way of understanding things based on how I've come to learn it. But one of the things is learning your own energy needs from an animal perspective, a human perspective, and a little bit higher, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs in classical psychology. But it's actually a better model to work with, and learning how to know ourselves. Like she would say, Jennifer Foster is her name, and she's from the UK. And she would say, when we don't know who we are until we know how we feel. But it's how we feel on the deepest, like a really deep core level. And it could even be what's going on subconsciously that we're not always aware of. But when we become aware of like, well, how do I really feel? And then learning how, from a real basic level, to build up our own sense of being by knowing how we feel and how we want to feel, and how we can build our life and our social interpersonal level, so that we have what we need to be truly sovereign and authentic in a real way in the world, in a kind and humble way in the real world. So we could actually find our own tribe who wants to function from this level of beingness. Because our society in general, in the Western world in particular, we are propelled more towards the mental realm, intellectual, but also with the artificial intelligence, computer and cell phone technology. It is already seeking to suck our energy and upload us into this artificial reality, which is more of a mental realm instead of the feeling, being realm, which of what we are. So we need to be more being, feeling, doesn't mean we're not intellectual, but we need to be functioning on more of a real rooted level of authenticness in a good feel here and now. This is who we are in the real world. And it's something that is lacking more and more, especially during the lockdown. Basically, they're trying to upload us into the false reality through, it's like virtual upload. Like, we have to be virtually uploaded in order to like exist in the world, but then we get pulled into all these belief systems, and it's a false way of actually living. So I think the homeschooling is probably good if we can convert them back to a more real, authentic feeling in the world, learning like really good skills that would be here and now in the world with like good feeling for who we are, and this is how we feel, and it's okay for who we are. Except, as long as they're not being bad kids and taking advantage of, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a way of being that it when you live it and feel it. But if you've never really been there, like people who've been dissociated all their lives from maybe severe trauma and use the mental world to escape in as almost a form of addiction, then they have a hard time even understanding what that means. So this is a whole new way of being and living, but it helps in terms of good old-fashioned trauma resolution so that we can learn how to reroute with our authentic selves and beingness. So that's helpful, I think.
Absolutely. And we know that there are patterns of how they actually embed the screens with certain frequencies and mind controlling programs. It's in the screens. So it keeps us distant, disconnected from that, the life force and power as well. So it's even embedded in it. So we become more the machines they can control and everything. So I'm also curious because of to go back a little bit into this alien and abductions and the manipulation, because now we can see it in the machines, we can see the AI, the fear mongering. There are so many ways we are being manipulated and controlled, and they're trying to keep us enslaved. So are there any tips and signs that how do we know if there's a love bite? Are there any? We can read your book, but just give us a little.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing, but in the alien abduction angle of it, which is really the more basic alien angle of like an alien love bite, for example, that would be more obvious, which some people may actually have more of the hyperdimensional interference, dark side of Cupid thing. But to make it simple, let's say in my book, I said, well, you can have a love bite if this is happening. Multiple UFO encounters, and then feeling like you dreamed about a person or you were abducted and they were shown to you, and then you were bonded with them in some way in some scenario you remember, or the aliens actually showing you and telling you you're going to meet this person, or having a dream that you see their face in your mind or whatever, and then you meet them a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever, and then all these magical synchronicities just start happening and popping off to connect you two together in a way that seems, supernatural or paranormal. And then in conjunction with that, you might have a high level of drama or a roller coaster thing where you can't necessarily consummate the relationship, what we call emotional highs and crashing lows. Or if you're having during the drama of that particular relationship that is just starting or being set up, you might have more alien encounters or abductions during that time period, for example, which means they're checking in on you. They're working it up, basically. Or if you have, let's say you had a love obsession or a strong connection with someone, and then let's say you went on a camping trip and you got abducted during that camping trip and you know it. And then after that, you just like don't have feelings for this person anymore. It's just like, I don't know what happened, but I'm just not interested anymore. And that's like a switching off kind of thing that can happen after something happened. Somebody did something to you during an abduction, or like, did you have an abduction or did you have an event? Did you have one of those nights where you remembered absolutely nothing, or there was missing time, or you woke up with body marks, the classic alien abduction stuff mixed in with what we call what feels like a stage managed dream that's being kind of influenced, where the feel of it is different. Okay. So that would be something feels off, right? And then the drama of the love obsession, where it takes the dynamic of, the emotional highs, crashing lows, you can't consummate it, more abductions or maybe more chaos in your life, or more of the weird paranormal MIB kind of stuff popping up in your life, So that would be like the obvious stuff. And then the synchronicities and the astral connections and sudden psychic abilities with this person, that would be like, oh, that sounds like a love bite. And it depends. It could be good, but then there's always like a crash or a switching off that happens with this a lot of the times.
Okay.
Or the whole narcissistic quality of maybe the targeted partner who's like hosted by an entity, for example. So that would be more of the dark side of Cupid thing that has been reported like in my second book. So it plays out with more of the narcissistic themes or the highly supernatural themes, where there's an observance of what I call the third party entity. So that you may observe a ghost or an entity clairvoyantly or energetic. It feels different. Something happened. You feel like entities jumping in you, or weird sexual dreams that are not like normal, that kind of thing.
So really it comes back to, the real big thing is to be aware of what's going on in your life, to stop putting the pieces together and go, hold on.
Yeah. And a lot of people
things are adding up here, or things are adding up way too much, depending which way around you want to go.
And a lot of people don't add things up. Like many people who've been through trauma, or let's say if you're an abductee, they've been taking you since you're a kid, sometimes since you're a baby. So it's normalized to have events where you just kind of have missing time, you don't remember, and there's some hidden trauma that you don't really remember and just kind of avoid it. And like, oh, I don't know, like they act like it's not real. And then you observe their life like, whoa, there's an addiction going on here. This person like in your life is like, I don't know, they're abusing you. There's a level of lack of awareness sometimes in these people's lives and it's always like the psychological defense mechanism to avoid the feelings of the trauma, because it is intense. And sometimes it's the mind control on top of the trauma done by the handlers and the abductors or the mind controllers themselves, which will try to steer the person away from awareness. So what we think is like common sense, like, well, let's just be aware of what's going on in our life. Well, a lot of people are not aware. Yeah. And they like, oh, they'll throw it off. That's just the pizza I had last night. And you wake up with freaking, implant marks on your arm, or it was just the pizza I had last night. I don't think so. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you got to pay attention. But if people don't have that in their narrative as a possibility, they're like, they just write it off. But there's a lot going on that if we know what to look for now, we can figure it out. But sometimes we don't know how to ask the questions. And one of the things that has come up in my research would be people who were, let's say, researchers of alien abductions, for example. The ones who were really good at it were the ones who already had experiences, and they knew what to look for because they have the deep insight and the gut instinct and the experiences on multiple levels of reality to know, like, this is what to look for. I know what this is. But somebody who's like purely a scientist and they're like total neutral observer and they don't have a propensity to spin the narrative based on what they want, they might be able to look at things more even keel, but they're going to miss things. And that's what I found, that, people who try to be too scientific about things, they totally miss it. Because you got to have sometimes clairvoyant faculties to even know what's happening on all these different levels to piece the picture together. I hate to say it, but this is what we figured out.
Yeah, the whole science is built on a three-dimensional reality, and this is not in a 3D reality. So, you can't see it. You wouldn't be able, to see some marks and stuff. Just another little thing that, because it's been coming up so much this last year, I feel a lot of people talking about dreams. They dream about Trump.
Yeah.
And, like he's the savior, or, they have conversations with him and stuff. So have you heard anything about this, and what's your take on it?
I have to say, I've dreamt about him too.
Oh yeah.
So, but it's kind of like goes back to the public figures or the celebrity figures that we may dream about. And sometimes it's because it's an archetype already in the general collective unconscious. It really is a real archetype, and it may even come up in things like reverse speech. But sometimes it is a real connection on an archetypal or an astral level where, that energy is coming up. So But I think now it's like an archetype that pops up. Like we have our own archetypes. Like if you've ever done Jungian dream symbology or lucid dream analysis, where you keep a journal and then you start to know these are like collective unconscious Jungian archetypes. And then this is a personal archetype and symbol that I know based on who I am, how to recognize all my symbols. So sometimes it's a good practice actually to write down your dreams and remember these things on other levels so you can get a clearer picture of how that's communicating to you. But yeah, I mean, these things happen. I've had several reports of important public figures coming up in people's dreams that seem to be beyond a dream.
Yeah, there's a lot of them talking about, like, being a lot of getting information about the plan and all of that. And then, things are actually happening later. But on the other hand, these days, the discernment is quite something as well, because also, as you were saying before about the if you don't have an experience, if it's not part of your field, you won't be able to see it. So it also means that we need to believe something to be able to see it in a way. So if it's not even, which means that the polarity in these days becomes even more stronger. So, but they will see the signs in everything that might not be a sign. And I think that is also part of the journey at the moment, is really to have that discernment. Is it a sign of something, or is it just that I see what I want to see? Yeah.
And that's actually a Buddhist practice, as well as like doing emotional literacy work, where we really want to get through our own triggers of personalized trauma, beliefs, strong feelings. And then if we can desensitize that and, release that, then we can be more clear on what we're perceiving. But, even experts have a hard time, like even master meditators, they're still asking a lot of questions too. So it's a learning process.
Yeah,
well, that's what life's all about, isn't it? I mean, it's a learning process. That's why we're here. And we just get different versions of it depending on what we need to learn right now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I wish I knew all the answers, but sometimes I'm like, wow, I thought I knew that. I'm like, well, there are some mysteries, and I always found that the mysteries were how to really have accurate spiritual discernment, and even discernment of someone's, what I call their capabilities and their intentions in any interaction, so that you could make the appropriate decisions like somebody would, even if you were in the military and you have to assess something in the moment. You don't have time to assess them over years to find out like what kind of person they are. You got to know like in the moment, and how to really hone your acuity so that you can spiritually discern, so that you don't have to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and put yourself at risk for anything that you wouldn't want to have happen to you. And it's a mystery sometimes, because sometimes I think, it is our destiny to go through a certain experience, and you only know when you come out of the experience what the benefit was in terms of what you needed to know or in life. So I don't know.
Yeah. I'm realizing more and more this year that it's like going, as you say, the discernment, and then it's just going, well, it could be true.
Yeah.
It might not be true. So what is the question?
I know.
And just constantly sitting in the next question and waiting for the answer to that question, rather than going true, false, rubbish, conspiracy theorist, or whatever else you want to label it as at that precise moment. We've decided, because we know conspiracy means breathe with spirit anyway, so we're quite happy to do conspiracy.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, who would ever have known it would be so nutty with the way things are happening? I mean, I would have never known, because it sounds so crazy talking about alien love bites. Are you kidding me? I mean, it sounds totally nutty, but I swear to God, this shit happens. And it was just happened to be a term that actually somebody created who was already having alien abductions. And it was a small group, I think, out of the Bay Area in California that actually coined the term alien love bite. And then Barbara Bartholock and I, we would talk more. We say, it's a love bite, Then we'd say, it's an LB, And then we just, that's love bitey. And then so I just decided to call that that's what it was. It's an alien love bite. It's when the aliens do this and this is what happens. But, you know, it could be, some people think it's a twin flame or a false twin flame kind of thing, but you really have to see how it plays out.
And it all comes back to words, meanings, and interpretation, isn't it? Which is what we've started delving in a lot with you know, our mutual friend Henrik is really helping guide us on that and looking at the words and what they truly mean.
Our spell casting, and you know, I guess it says a lot for silent retreats and the benefit of silent retreats, and learning, expanding awareness in the absence of speaking words. And that's actually a phenomenal thing if you could ever do that. You go through a silent meditation retreat and observe how your awareness just expands, and it's amazing, because that's how actually I got more aware. I started doing Buddhist meditation retreats way back when, and started becoming really aware to the point where it was almost shocking awareness that was overwhelming. And that helped me discern and learn things in a way that the new way of learning and becoming aware, instead of doing, let's say, psychological counseling and like the psychobabble trauma resolution, which has its value, but I found that Buddhist meditation practices amped up the awareness and even self-knowledge to a certain degree, much more than if somebody just did counseling and therapy in 12-step groups or something.
Absolutely.
So there's something to be said about meditation, I think.
Yeah, really absolutely. I'd agree with you totally.
Yeah.
You know,
it's much more empowering.
Yeah.
Because also it's just like you find the connection to who you are, and you know, you learn how to, you know, to read your energy and see what comes up, and whilst there's not an external person to fix you. And I think that we come from this so embedded in the society, this expert society where, you know, I'm an expert, so I'm going to fix you because something is wrong with you. And when you are only with yourself in silence, you realize you have all the knowledge, you have all the wisdom, and as long as you have some tools what to do with the things that comes up, the shit that comes up when
lot. I know.
I think
I was glad that I had some good teachers, and I did a lot of lucid dream yoga practices with good teachers, and I was really happy that I had an opportunity to do that in earlier years. So I would like to think that I had all the knowledge myself, and I suppose we do, but I needed instruction in order to be able to be at the place where I could be still and start observing what was even in my own conscious and subconscious, and then observing what's coming from other people's minds, and then realizing that we are like this, what do you call it, diffusing, that we really are all connected, in other words. And other people's minds and thoughts and feelings will affect us and what we think and what we pick up. And sometimes we think it's our own thought, and like we're actually picking up somebody else's. And that's like when it gets really interesting.
Yeah, but isn't that also what they say? You know, I know that the Aman Bhagavan, and, you know, they always talk about the collective consciousness. That's where the thought is. So it's also like which channel, radio station do we tune into, and what type of thought, you know, connections are in that channel. And, you know, if it's so we can just unplug and, you know, tune into a new channel with higher vibrating thought patterns. So we don't have any thoughts that are ours. It's in the collective, all of it. So it's also part of the journey, I think, that to realize it's not even my thoughts, it's just out there.
Yeah.
But where can people find you, Eve? Because I'm sure we will put all the links to your books and everything as well in the show notes. But
it's good, because my both books are available through me personally, and my website is evelorgen.com. And you can get both hard copies now, because there is a change in the publisher of this Dark Side of Cupid book, where I don't know if it's no longer available through Kindle. So I think you may only be able to get the hard copy through me unless you go through a used bookseller. So you can go through me personally. And then the Lovebite is available Kindle, also Amazon, and then me through a hard copy. And I wouldn't get used because the price has gone up quite a bit. So just go through me directly if you want a book. And the other thing I wanted to say, that there is a Facebook group, a private one called Alien Lovebite, that I I go on, maybe once or twice a week. I don't go every day. That's moderated by someone else, but it is a group where we could talk about more of the weird alien stuff and the whole theme. So that's also a place you could check for updates. And I also am starting a group with Jennifer Foster on January 20th for 6 weeks, online Zoom support group for like 2 hours once a week, where we work with the energy dynamic model to learn our energy dynamic and others, and how to build our good feel energy and build our energy level so that we're more resilient to stress, and learn how to grieve naturally and become more authentic. I like this model because it's a new way of being that I've been able to apply in the past 2 years. It took like 2 years to really get it. And I found that this works, and it works in a real world way where we start to understand our basic needs and learning how to get those needs in a kind and humble way in the world, so that we can build on our strength and our authenticness, but also be able to attract others who have similar integrity and values, so that we get into better relationships instead of the ones that we don't want. So that's something we're going to be doing soon. And I don't know if there's anything else.
How would people get in contact for that course?
Oh, my website, evelorgen.com, I did put up a blog post, and I just started a newsletter, which I'm trying to get with the MailChimp thing, and they haven't gone out perfectly, so I may have to redo them, but you could always email me, actually ask me, at elorgen@gmail.com, and just send me an email if you have a question, and that might be easier that way.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it's quite perfect when you talk about the resilience, because I just saw that Teal Swan, she said that, the main energy for 2021 is resilience. So you're spot on, Eve.
Yes, definitely.
It's the word of the year.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, you definitely can feel the energy that's what's needed, isn't it? It's the resilience.
Yeah, because we can be sensitive and aware, but if we don't have the buffering and the resilience, we can be just completely thrown off with everything we're hit with. So we want the awareness, but we want the buffering and the resilience and the strength of, really building your energy to be able to handle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's what this year is going to be fun.
Yeah, it is. Exactly. I think that is.
We will be tested. It's already started.
Yeah. So I'm totally agree. It feels like it's going to be a roller coaster ride of dimensions, really.
Yeah.
We'll just strap in, right? And act like a good gymnast or a yogi, and you know how to go the highs and the lows, and you actually have fun with it. So
yeah.
And I think that's the big secret, isn't it? Is having fun with it rather than getting bogged into the fear and things.
And remember, this too shall pass.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Because even like trauma work can be quite joyful when you start to dive into it. It's the resistance to it, because we have so much fear of what will come up so many times.
Yeah.
And I say it every bloody time, not as much anymore, but when I started and got in contact with some of the deepest traumas, and there was sexual abuse, and there was a lot, and going there, and then after, it's like, that's it? Is that what was I so afraid of?
It's nearly always that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's
like, duh. It is so in the programs.
And it's part of being human, and many of us have been there. So it's just nice to be able to connect with people in an authentic level where you feel like you really don't have to hide yourself anymore, and you're not going to be attacked all the time. And it's good to be able to find that in your life where you can actually have those interpersonal connections that you trust, and you could just be you and be so grateful that you have that,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. That's one of the reasons we started Holy Land, was to build up a community where we can totally be honest and open and authentic, and have meltdowns and know that we're going to be supported, and just have that compassion and love for each other.
Yeah.
And go to the very extremes where the impossible becomes a reality. That's the time.
We're living it right now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it was so lovely to have you with us, Eve. And so thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and tips and all your weird experiences with us. It was so much fun.
We got them all, right? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Please find links and information about this episode in the show notes. And come to Holy Land to find all our podcast episodes. Holy Land is where leaders in wholeness and sovereignty meet. Holy Land, where we actively co-create whole and holy nations founded on compassion and freedom. And Holy Land is not for followers nor sheep. Join us on holyland.me. We accompany you there with Believe in You from our household musician John Century. See you in Holy Land. Dare to be different and unleash your genius at our Holy Land membership site, wholyland.me.